Alaska, there are over 3,000 rivers and 3 million lakes. When viewed from the air, the lake's shaped like a giant fish.
Oh my God!
They call it Alaska's Jaws, only colder, hungrier, and far more real. Beneath the icy surface of Lake Iliamna, something massive and metallic moves in silence.
He said it's longer than the boat, and the boat was almost like a 32-footer.
Look at the size of it. Look at the size of this blossom thing.
Boats return battered, nets torn apart, and fishermen swear they've seen shapes longer than buses sliding through the dark. The locals don't question it. They just call it the monster.
Sitting there in awe, just dumbstruck of what the heck am I looking at?
There's definitely something big down there.
Now watch, its head's gonna pop out.
Lake Iliamna's mystery. Most of Alaska's 3 million lakes sit undisturbed, anonymous, known only to the caribou and ravens. One lake is different. It has a name, a reputation, and a silence that hangs over it like fog. Lake Iliamna stretches across the Alaskan interior like a scar on the landscape, over 1,000 square miles of dark water. To understand the scale, picture dropping the entire city of Los Angeles into it, then adding New York City. There would still be room left over, 80 miles long, 25 miles wide at its broadest point, and no highways lead there. No cities line the shore. The only way in is by float plane, and even pilots treat it with a respect that borders on fear. But size alone doesn't make Lake Iliamna terrifying. In some places, the water drops nearly 1,000 feet straight down, deeper than the Eiffel Tower is tall. Researchers have lowered weighted lines 1,300 feet without touching bottom. The water stays cold year-round, hovering just above freezing even in summer, and in that cold darkness, something moves. Local fishermen call it the lake that swallows secrets. They mean it literally. Things thrown into Iliamna don't always come back up. Boats disappear, nets vanish, and sometimes people go into the water and are never seen again. Ask any local why, and they will give you the same answer. It's not the water, it's not the cold, it's not accidents or bad luck, it's what hunts in the deep. The locals have a name for it. They call it Ili, the Iliamna Lake Monster. Ili, Alaska's Jaws. For over a century, people have described the same creature. Different witnesses, different decades, different parts of the lake. But the details match too closely to be a coincidence. 30 feet long, sometimes larger. Serpent-like body with smooth metallic skin, the color of dull aluminum. The head is blunt and massive. Some say wolf-like, others say shark-like. Visible fins along the body and a vertical tail that moves side to side like a fish, not up and down like a whale. But one detail separates Ili from every other lake monster story in the world. It never surfaces to breathe. Whales need air. Seals need air. Every mammal that swims must come up eventually. Ili does not. Witnesses have watched it for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, longer, without ever seeing it break the surface. Whatever Ili is, it does not need oxygen from above the water. It breathes like a fish. It lives like a fish. The tail movement suggests a shark, but the size makes that impossible. Bull sharks are the largest sharks that can survive in freshwater, and they max out at just over 11 feet. The record freshwater catch was 9 feet 4 inches. Witnesses describe Ili as 30 feet long, sometimes much larger. Next to Ili, a bull shark would look like bait. Ili would be 3 to 5 times larger than any freshwater shark ever documented. And unlike bull sharks, which must return to saltwater periodically, Ili appears to live in the lake year-round. Researchers have tried to identify what Ili could be. Matt Bill, a former U.S. Air Force officer and science researcher, investigated every possibility. He ruled out every known fish in Alaska. The only freshwater fish large enough would be white sturgeon, which can exceed 20 feet in northern waters. But white sturgeon aren't found in Lake Iliamna. The lake has been surveyed for decades. Fishermen work it year-round. No sturgeon has ever been caught, seen, or documented. September 1942. The sighting that changed everything. Babe Allsworth had flown over Lake Iliamna hundreds of times. He knew every inlet, every island, every trick the light played on the water. On that September morning in 1942, he was carrying Bill Hammersley, a wildlife agent who had spent years studying Alaskan fish. Between them, they had seen everything that swam, flew, or crawled in Alaska. Allsworth spotted dark shapes near an unnamed island. He thought they were logs at first, driftwood from the mountains. Then the logs moved. He banked the plane hard and dropped from 1,000 feet to 300. More than a dozen creatures swam beneath the plane in perfect formation. Each one was longer than the plane's 15-foot pontoons. Their bodies were thick and rounded, the color of dull aluminum. Their heads were blunt and squared off, unlike any fish either man had seen. The tails moved side to side, not up and down the way whales move. Hammersley knew that detail mattered. Whales have horizontal tail flukes that move up and down. These creatures had vertical tails that swept side to side, the way sharks move, but they were far too large to be any known fish, and they never surfaced. Whales need air. They come up every few minutes to breathe. Hammersley watched these creatures for 10 full minutes as Allsworth circled overhead. Not once did they break the surface. The creatures moved together like a military unit. They held formation, turning in unison, adjusting speed as a group. Then, without any visible signal, they all dove at the same instant. Within seconds, they had vanished into the black water. The lake surface went still. The witnesses multiply. Larry Rost kept quiet for 2 years. He was a pilot for the U.S. Coast and Geodetic Survey, a professional who knew what belonged in Alaskan waters. In fall 1945, he flew low over Lake Iliamna and saw something impossible. A fish over 20 feet long, swimming just below the surface. Metallic skin, the color of dull aluminum. He circled back to confirm what he was seeing. It was still there, gliding through the water, never once surfacing for air. Ross told no one. He thought people would call him crazy. But when other pilots started reporting similar sightings, he came forward. One pilot flying a mail route spotted 4 massive creatures swimming in a diamond formation. Each one was the size of a small whale. They moved together, perfectly coordinated, then dove in unison and vanished. Then came 1977. Tim Leoport was flying above Pedro Bay with 2 passengers when they spotted a massive shape at the surface, its back breaking the water. As the plane's shadow passed over it, the creature arched like a cat stretching, then dove straight down. Perfectly vertical. The tail remained visible for nearly 30 seconds as it descended into the deep. All 3 witnesses watched it sink, the tail sweeping side to side until it disappeared into the black water. When steel breaks, physical evidence that cannot be ignored. Tom Slick was an oil tycoon from Texas with an obsession. He hunted creatures science said didn't exist. He had funded expeditions to the Himalayas and the Pacific Northwest, chasing Yeti and Bigfoot. When he heard about Lake Iliamna, he knew he had to investigate. In 1959, Slick arrived in Alaska with researchers and equipment to catch something massive. His team constructed a steel hook, thick as a man's thumb, designed for something weighing thousands of pounds. They baited it with moose meat and attached it to an aircraft cable rated for 2,000 pounds. Then they lowered it into the deepest part of the lake and waited. Something took the bait. Whatever grabbed that hook pulled with so much force that the aircraft cable snapped like fishing line. Weeks later, they found the hook washed up on shore, bent into a pretzel. Engineers examined the damage and said it required over 3,000 pounds of pressure. No known fish in Alaska could generate that power. The sightings continued. In 1967, Alaska missionary Chuck Krapachetz was flying his float plane over the lake when he spotted something massive in the water below. He grabbed his radio and called for other pilots, hoping someone could arrive fast enough to verify what he was seeing. No one made it in time, but Krapachetz knew what he saw, and he told his friends about it. One of those friends decided to catch the creature himself. He used a stainless steel cable with massive tuna hooks, each 8 to 9 inches long. He baited them with caribou meat, secured the lines to his float plane, and sat on one of the floats to wait. The plane jerked suddenly, hard enough to throw him into the water. Something was dragging the entire aircraft across the lake. He cut himself free and swam to shore, watching his plane get towed away by whatever was on the other end of the line. He walked miles along the shoreline following his plane. When he finally recovered it, 3 of the steel cables were gone. The 4th cable remained, but the massive hook had been straightened completely. These hooks were designed to catch tuna weighing hundreds of pounds. Something in Lake Iliamna had bent them like paper clips. The vanishings, when lake turned deadly. Draw a line between Anchorage, Juneau, and Utqiagvik on a map of Alaska. The triangle you create covers over 500,000 square miles of wilderness. Inside that triangle, more people vanish than anywhere else in the United States. It has seen over 16,000 disappearances since the 1980s. Lake Iliamna sits within the Alaska Triangle and is a hotspot for disappearances. What makes these cases disturbing is not just that people vanish, it is how they vanish. In August 1984, a float plane crashed in Iliamna Bay. Witnesses watched Philip Littleford swim toward shore. The water was calm. The shore was close. He was an experienced swimmer, and it should have been an easy swim. Then he disappeared from sight. A search was carried out, but his body was never found. The pattern continued. In October 2009, 4 men took their boat out on Lake Iliamna for a routine trip. These were not tourists. These were men who knew the lake and had made this crossing dozens of times before. Something went wrong, and the boat capsized. All 4 men ended up in the water, clinging to the overturned hull. 3 of them decided to swim for shore. The 4th man made a different decision. He stayed with the boat. His 3 friends pushed off into the dark water. They were strong swimmers with life jackets. The shore was visible. They should have made it. 3 days later, rescuers found the man who stayed with the boat, barely alive. Search teams found 1 body floating 3 miles from shore. The other 2 men were never found. No bodies, no clothing, no trace. The pattern continued. In May 2012, Francois Guinaud kayaked near Lake Iliamna. Considering his experience, the lake seemed like his next challenge to conquer. The 32-year-old French adventurer had survived crossing Cook Inlet, walking across the Yukon in winter, and countless other close calls. In June, rangers found his abandoned kayak. The mysteries keep continuing. Boats drift across the lake with no one aboard. Experienced fishermen vanish during perfect weather. People swimming in shallow water go under and do not come back up. The locals have watched this pattern for generations. The Tlingit warned about specific zones where the Lake Iliamna monster lives. They marked places on the lake to avoid, passed down through songs and stories. Modern search and rescue teams have their own maps now, their own forbidden areas where searches end badly. The 1980s, mass sightings and the scarred giant. Vera Collier was checking her fishing nets near the village of Iliamna in the summer of 1987. It was early morning, the water still and clear. Then she saw something that made her pull up the nets and row for shore. A black shape moved beneath her boat. It was massive, easily 25 feet long. It circled once, slow and deliberate, then came around again. On the 3rd pass, Vera saw a white stripe running down the creature's dorsal fin, bright against the black skin. When she reached shore, her nephew told her he'd seen something else. Through his binoculars, he'd noticed the creature's skin was covered in scars. Long parallel marks ran along its side, deep grooves that looked like claw marks. Something with massive talons had attacked this creature, and it had survived. Other witnesses started reporting the same white stripe, seeing the same individual across different years. People were tracking a specific creature that lived in the lake year-round. Then came 1988. 17 people witnessed creatures surfacing in Lake Iliamna on the same day. Some were in boats, others were standing on shore. They were scattered across the lake, some 10 miles apart or more, with no way to communicate with each other. And they all saw the same thing. Multiple creatures breaking the surface simultaneously, visible for several seconds before diving back down. This was not one confused witness. This was a mass sighting involving nearly 24 people. Some had never heard the monster stories before, but the descriptions matched, detail for detail. Something had driven multiple creatures to the surface at once, across miles of open water, in full view of witnesses who had no reason to coordinate their stories. The sightings prove something lives in Lake Iliamna, but they don't explain how creatures this large have stayed hidden for over a century. The answer lies in the lake itself. The perfect predator's paradise. Scientists who study Lake Iliamna say it has 2 personalities, and only one of them is friendly. The surface layer is where life happens. Salmon spawn there every summer in numbers so thick the water turns silver, and seals patrol the shallows hunting for fish. But below that layer, something else exists. Below that layer is where Ili lives. The deep zone is pitch black. No light penetrates, not even on the brightest summer day. The pressure would crush a human body, and the temperature never changes, hovering just above freezing regardless of season. Between these 2 worlds sits the thermocline, a barrier where warm water meets cold. For anything trying to hide, it's perfect. Sonar signals weaken and scatter below that line. Light disappears completely, and visibility drops to almost 0. Any unknown creature could be 30 feet below your boat, massive and hunting, and you would never know. The lake is remote in ways that matter. No roads lead to it. The nearest real town sits over 100 miles away. Most of the shoreline has never been touched. But it's the fishermen who work the lake who tell the real stories. They talk about how certain spots feel wrong. The water gets too still, or it ripples when there's no wind. Boats drift off course for no reason. Propellers hit something solid in open water where the depth charts show nothing but empty lake, and the impact shudders through the hull hard enough to rattle your teeth. They know what causes it. The structure of Lake Iliamna isn't just unusual, it's perfect for a monster like Ili. Perfect for something that doesn't want to be found. The Ocean Gateway. When marine monsters migrate inland. The Kivachak River flows out of the lake and runs all the way to Bristol Bay, then to the Bering Sea. It is not a small creek, but a wide, deep river capable of carrying much larger things, and that means creatures from the ocean can swim upstream, slip into the lake, and vanish. Locals have spotted harbor seals swimming in Lake Iliamna, miles and miles from the nearest saltwater. These seals have adapted to live in freshwater full-time. They are one of the only populations of freshwater seals on the entire planet. Beluga whales have been spotted in the lake too, miles from saltwater, as comfortable as if they never left the ocean. If seals can make that journey, if whales can make that journey, then something else could have made it too. Something bigger, something older, something that found the lake and never left. Something like Ili. The ocean is full of creatures we have never seen, species that live in trenches so deep we cannot reach them with submarines. Giant squid that grow to the size of school buses. Sleeper sharks that live for centuries in water so cold and dark it might as well be outer space, and some of them have a direct route into this lake. Once inside, they would find everything they need. The water is deep and cold. The lake is full of salmon, thousands and thousands of them, swimming upriver every year to spawn. Ili would never go hungry. And because the lake is so remote, a monster like Ili could live its entire life without ever being documented. Marine animals are bigger than freshwater animals. Ocean predators grow larger, hunt in deeper water, and live longer than anything found in lakes and rivers. This might explain why Ili can exist here. An ocean predator that swam upstream and adapted to fresh water would face no competition. It would be the apex predator in an environment with unlimited food and no threats. Ancient warnings. The indigenous knowledge. The Tlingit people lived beside Lake Iliamna for centuries before white explorers arrived. They had a name for what lived in the water. They called it Gunakadayat. Some say the name means water wolf. Others say it means the thing that hunts from below. Both names describe the same thing, a predator that rises from the deep and drags people under. The Tlingit carved images of Gunakadayat into totem poles. The creature had the head of a wolf and the body of an orca, long and powerful, with teeth that could crush bones. The elders told stories about it, and they were not stories meant to entertain. They were warnings. When the water turned black, they said, it was time to leave. When the surface rippled without wind, you did not stay to see what caused it. If you saw the creature rise, you paddled for shore as fast as you could, because if it capsized your canoe, you were not coming back up. The Aleut people had their own name for the creatures. They called them Jignuk. The name means the quick-taker. According to their oral histories, the Jignuk hunted in groups. They circled boats, moving beneath the surface, and then struck from below. Fishermen who traveled alone often disappeared. Songs still sung in some Aleut villages warned people to stay away from certain parts of the lake, places where the old swimmers congregated. These stories have been passed down for over 1,000 years. What makes these legends interesting is how specific they are. The Tlingit described the creature as having skin that looked like metal in the sunlight. They said it could generate whirlpools strong enough to sink canoes. The Aleut told stories of the Jignuk working together, driving fish into shallow water where they were easier to catch. Gunakadayat, Jignuk, Ili. Different names across different centuries, but the sightings remain the same. Metallic skin, coordinated hunting, massive size. The indigenous people were not telling stories. They were recording what they saw. The Russian archives and biblical connections. Russian fur traders came to Alaska in the 1790s, hunting for sea otter pelts. They were rough men, used to harsh conditions. They were not the type to believe in monsters. But Lake Iliamna changed their minds. A journal discovered in archives tells what happened to one group of traders. They were crossing the lake in wooden boats when something attacked from below. The journal describes fish the size of trees rising from the water and striking the boats. 3 men were pulled overboard. Their bodies were never recovered. The Russians started avoiding Lake Iliamna after that. They marked it on their maps with special symbols, the kind reserved for waters known to contain dangerous creatures. They traded with indigenous people for safe passage around the lake rather than crossing it themselves. The stories from Lake Iliamna match stories from other places around the world. The Bible mentions the Leviathan, a massive sea creature that could crush ships. Ancient texts describe the behemoth, a water beast so large it could swallow whales. If creatures like that existed in the past, why could they not exist now? The stories from Lake Iliamna are not isolated. Cultures around the world have described massive water predators that don't match any known species. The Bible mentions the Leviathan, a sea creature so powerful it could crush ships, and the behemoth, a water beast of enormous size. Norse sailors spoke of the kraken. Japanese fishermen feared the umabozu. For centuries, scientists dismissed these accounts as myth and superstition. But what if some of them were observations? Indigenous people around Lake Iliamna described creatures with specific details: vertical tail movement, metallic skin, coordinated hunting. These weren't vague monster stories. They were behavioral descriptions. The question isn't whether ancient people believed in sea monsters. The question is what they actually saw. And in Lake Iliamna, people are still seeing it. Forced into the open, climate and consequences. The sightings are getting worse. Since 2015, encounters at Lake Iliamna have increased dramatically, and the pattern has shifted. Witnesses no longer report brief glimpses of single creatures. They describe groups. Multiple animals are surfacing together, hunting in coordination, and appearing in areas where they were rarely seen before. Alaska's version of Jaws is real, and it's bigger than you've ever seen. In 2017, near the village of Kokonok, multiple witnesses reported seeing 3 large creatures at once. A local fisherman with years of experience on Iliamna's waters described the largest as double the size of a 32-foot gillnetter. Fishermen who work the lake professionally report that nets are being destroyed nightly, and it's becoming more frequent than in previous years. Not just torn, but shredded beyond repair. Boats are being bumped hard enough to crack fiberglass hulls. Propellers are coming back bent and twisted, damaged in ways that should not be possible from hitting rocks or logs. The Lake Iliamna monster is no longer staying in the deep zones. It is coming closer to shore, crossing paths with humans more frequently, and behaving more aggressively. Something has changed. Climate change may be forcing the monster into the open. Alaska is warming faster than almost anywhere else on Earth. Water temperatures are rising and falling in new patterns. Salmon runs are being disrupted, arriving later and in smaller numbers than before. If Ili depends on salmon as a primary food source, it may be following the fish into new areas, hunting where it never had to hunt before. The question is no longer whether this creature exists. The question is what happens when it runs out of places to hide. History has a habit of proving the impossible real. The giant squid was dismissed as a drunken sailor's fantasy for centuries before scientists finally pulled one from the deep. Komodo dragons were considered Indonesian folklore, tales of massive land crocodiles on remote islands that Westerners refused to believe, until a Dutch colonial officer shot one in 1910 and dragged the body back as proof. The coelacanth, a fish that went extinct 70 million years ago, according to every textbook, turned up alive in a fishing net in 1938. Oarfish followed the same pattern. Sailors reported seeing silver serpents longer than their ships, gliding through deep water with bodies that rippled like ribbons. Scientists called it a myth, hallucination, exaggeration from men too long at sea. Then the bodies started washing ashore, 50 feet long, exactly as the sailors described. Science had to admit it was wrong. The pattern repeats. Eyewitnesses report something impossible. Experts dismiss it. Decades pass. Then proof surfaces, and the myth becomes fact. In Lake Iliamna, witnesses have been reporting the same creature for over a century. Same metallic skin, same massive size, same coordinated hunting behavior. The details never change. The sightings never stop. What seems impossible today may be proven real tomorrow. And in Lake Iliamna, that proof may already be swimming 30 feet below the surface. That's all for the Lake Iliamna monsters mystery. Don't miss the videos on screen now. They're just as interesting. Catch you in the next one.